How are you, gorgeous bastards? I'm back. I know it's been a good while, probably a week now, since the Rona Ronicles. I've been really busy with my regular job, and it was just, it's good. I'm not complaining. It's good to have work and stuff like that. And I'm not complaining as so many people do. But, I was knackered. And, I did a few other things as well. And so I don't want to be saying the same things every day just for the sake of it, until I have something new enters my consciousness, which did in the last few days. And but there's some great content out there by other Irish people. What's it called? Dave Cullen's Computing Forever. He's knocked it out about the ballpark in the last few shows he's done, particularly that one on the COVID trans. John Waters has done some great stuff with him and some other people. So there's a lot of, at least from the Irish point of view, there's a ton of stuff out there. Although my audience is predominantly international, and I was completely obscure in Ireland until probably John Waters noticed me, but until that point nobody knew who I was, and I had a reasonable following around the world, but so thank you for that, John. So, life's a funny old thing. So, when I was just thinking about things that they are today. And I was thinking about, there's a lot of, this whole thing of the new normal. And I saw on the RT website, they call it the next normal. They're trying to spin this vernacular in a different direction now. Because the new normal is a phrase that's kind of pissing off even some of the normies now. So, they put the word next in. The next normal. See, they're always switching the languages. It's this kind of neurolinguistic programming thing that they do. And so they're saying the next normal. Now, there's a lot of... You see, you have to be careful now. When someone puts a word into your head, you must not make the assumption that that's a fated thing. Like when a relationship goes through a bad time, right? We've all went through a relationship that went through a bad time and recovered. You should never say things like, well, this relationship is doomed. If there's a chance it's not doomed, because then you're kind of fating it to be doomed. And this is apocalyptic language, we're doomed. Remember the guy in Dad's Army? We're doomed. And, so when people are talking about the next normal, and then people buy into that and they say, oh, it's the whole, this technocratic future, which the likes of Bill Gates, is after, and all these people are after. And while I agree with that, that's definitely how those pieces of shit think. Don't let yourself be believed or fooled into accepting that that's what you're going to get. See, this is from the parallel society idea again. Now, looking through history, if I was to compare this period to what's coming, I would say it's probably the undoing of the damage caused by Christianity. Now, I'm not putting down Christians, okay? I'm talking about Christianity in terms of a political objective from the Roman Empire, right? Now, on the cusp of Christianity, there seemed to be, where it arrived, there seemed to be a degradation and a collapse of the societies it eventually took over. For example, there was a spiritual and a psychic collapse, right? There was a spiritual and psychic collapse at the end of the Roman Empire, in the late Iron Age, coming up to the time before Nero, but coming up to that era. This would be like 200 to 100 years before Christ was born, or let's say his time, if he existed, right? There was a collapse in the Roman psychic state. And we all know about things they started, having economic problems. The empire had never fully recovered from the Iceni revolt in England, in Britain. And, it had been that the Iceni revolt, the pagans had had damaged him so badly, well then the Romans were still pagans at that point too, that they never recovered psychically, and the empire began to contract and collapse in on itself in all kinds of ways. Now this economic, social and cultural implosion was demonstrated by a cult called Dismanibus. Now, Dismanibus was a weird thing that the Romans got into towards the end, where they began to worship death. And this death was about the worship of dead ancestors, which, funny enough, very similar thing happened in the Soviet Union too as well. I'll talk about that another time. And this worship of dead ancestors, that they became obsessed with, it was beyond, like, remembering my granddad or remembering my parents, my grandparents, or my cousins, or my dead brother who died in the, my great uncle died in the Punic Wars, or anything like that. It was my great uncle who died in the Punic Wars, but it was about an obsession with death. It was like, we're all going to die. They became like goths or something, for real. And we're all going to die. It's all hopeless, very nihilistic. And I don't know what, I think it was Kant who said every society begins as Stoics and ends as Epicureans. But there's a stage after the Epicurean stage, and that's the social and psychic degradation. And so this Manibus cult, it really gave the Romans no hope, and they started to truncate their pantheon of gods, and to the point where a lot of the gods and goddesses they had for everything, they started to lose their importance as lupus or Jupiter or Lupiter, when they call him. It comes from an Indo-European root word meaning the Almighty Father. Became Jove, Jupiter. Zeus to the Greeks became the Almighty God, and the only one they really worshipped. And the female goddesses kind of fell out of favour. And even the only one, it was only the working class of Rome itself and Roman cities that's like still venerated Diana, or because Artemis, she was still held closely by the working class, even though she wasn't an interventionary god. But it collapsed, and so when Christianity came along, it was just a matter of time. They switched they switched Jehovah with Jove. They switched the Virgin Mary with, Hecate, whatever goddess it was. And ironically, in the Celtic world, Minerva, who was a Roman goddess, started to be venerated by the Celtic people. So you had a point. See, this is interesting. The Celts didn't abandon their female gods. They kept their pantheon strong. But that only lasts a little bit longer. But in the Celtic world, you had a vast pantheon of gods and goddesses. And towards the end, it was the Lugh became a kind of a major figure of veneration among British and European Celtic tribes. So London comes from, and so on. And in Ireland, the Crom Cruach became the daddy god. So there was a kind of a slow distillation towards monotheism with a patriarchal god was happening at these places. And it was also happening in the East in Persia with Mithra, who was the popular god of the Roman army, in a Persian god. And Christianity really became a fusing of Mithra, and later on Odin or Wotan from the Germanic world, and that gave us the Jesus Christ of the modern era. And that gave them the archetypal forces. The rabbi gave the rabbi that to allow that religion to flourish in Europe and in the Mediterranean regions. And again, as Irish, there seems to be a lot of evidence that there was a hell of a lot of trouble in Ireland at the end of the pagan era. When the Christian authors talk about arriving in Ireland, and it was a war zone in the early Christian days, they're probably telling the truth about that. And not only were the Irish attacking each other, they were also launching constant attacks on Britain particularly to where Wales is now, Cornwall. This is why you have like Ogham stones and Celtic crosses all up that part of England and Wales, and up into Cumbria, and Scotland, of course. The Irish basically invented Scotland after stealing a chunk of it from the Romans, and so it was. There was a very warlike, murderous mentality, it seems to have been, in that period of Irish history. From what we can tell, there was also great craftsmanship and stuff like that as well, in terms of gold metalworking and things like that. So it was like there was that kind of a period. But what these 3 episodes had, and there's also another one, this is what really made me think about it. If you look at the Central American gods, the pantheon of Central American gods, leading up to the time of the Spanish invasion of Central America, the downfall of the Aztecs and the Mayans and so on, their gods were nasty. There was like very little to distinguish them from demons, and they were frightening looking things and terrifying things, and a complete absence of female goddesses. And those societies fell into decline of murder and death cults as well. So, and then Christianity arrived in all these cultures and offered people something beyond the failing pagan religion of the time. That's only a bit of the story. The other part of the story is political expediency, particularly with the Romans and Roman influences of places like Ireland, which did exist, and in Britain, to use Christianity as a New World Order type, a proto-New World Order type, to solidify Roman rule under a new system of the Holy See, what was to become the Holy See. And funny enough, and then the 1500s, just before the conquistadors arrived in Central America, the same collapse and fall into death cult horrifically with the Aztecs and the Mayans took place, but mostly with the Aztecs. And Christianity seemed like a better option after a while than what the Aztecs priests were offering, cutting people's hearts out and offering them to the sun. Horrific stuff on those pyramids. And we don't know, and the Aztecs didn't build those pyramids, they inherited them from a Aztecian civilization. And that got me thinking about today, right? Are we going to experience a new spirit? Is this rather than the end of the Industrial Revolution and the beginning of the technocratic society, is it really the end of the Christian world and the return of a polytheistic, more paganized world? The circle, remember in paganism everything comes in circles. And are we in fact seeing the end? Look, I know you Christians are going to go mad, particularly you ones in the Bible Belt in America, but the original New World Order was Christianity. That was what was used to solidify everything. And you can sit there in denial all you want, but that's what it was. And manifest destiny and everything, the conquests of Africa and India and everywhere else. Now, is that coming to an end rather than a technocratic thing coming in? And then, look, if you look at these societies as they collapsed into debt, they began worshipping debt. Well, we have the COVID numbers every day. Our leadership is obsessed with debt, completely obsessed with it, and their demons are statistical models. That's what the demons are today. The demons are an overriding fate in statistical models. There's no difference between the likes of a Professor Neil Ferguson running a new algorithm software program on a quantum computing mainframe in order to get improved statistical data, in order to make something that's not happen, and Aztec priests cutting out the hearts of Mayans and holding them up to the sun in the hope of placating the sun god to keep their empire safe. It's the same thing. You understand? If Professor Neil Ferguson and these civil servants you have in all our countries who are obsessed with statistical data, they're the Aztec priests of their time. And the same thing happened with the Romans. They had more gladiatorial games, more slaughter in the Colosseums, in order more of the death stuff, in order to try and solidify their power. And it's happening now again. But the demons are statistics, statistical data. Hold on a second. And like the hungry demons at the center of the Aztec religion, or maybe whatever Dismanibus demons were at the center of the Roman collapse, this demons they have is the need for statistics. It's hungry for statistics, and it has to have statistical data. And, you know, this in the future, this time in history will be looked upon as one of scientists' darkest moments, where science, in terms of experimentation, theorems, and hypotheses, was discarded in favour of what? A statistical modelling. Now, you cannot statistically model a chaotic, irrational, wild, chaotic universe. You cannot do that. You can't do that. You cannot create this is one of the mistakes that the Soviets made in time. When they came to agricultural outputs, they would say, well, we have so much, farmland in the Soviet Union. Say we're going to an area, Belarus, right now. We have so many hundreds of thousands of hectares of land that produces potatoes here, right? And the potato yield is, say, 3 million tons of potatoes a year, right? And they're saying, if we can add on a little bit more extra land and apply the same data modelling that we did for that previous amount of land, we can now project how many potatoes we'll have, including the new land. And so they make the prediction saying we'll have 3.2 million potatoes this year because of the extra land. And that's what the computer says, and that's what the statistics says. But that's not what nature says. You could have an early frost. You could have a fungal growth. You could have lots of things. You could have a virus of the farmers that affects them from collecting the harvest. And this is what collapsed the Soviet Union's economic output, is they kept applying these statistical data modelings towards things that were prone to error by their sheer nature of being part of a chaotic cosmos. And we're seeing that now with the climate change thing. Though we got better models this time, we got better computer models this time. Okay, but that'll be offset in a split second by a large coronal mass ejection from the sun. So we on about, and you can have that won't factor in for that. So your model is useless. And the same with the COVID thing. We have all these projections. It's going to go this way. It's going to go that way. You don't know shit. You're just going on previous projections. And they first these numbers, these statistical models became gods under the climate change cult religion. Well, as the climate change cult religion died, these statistical models are now demons. And that's what happened with the Aztecs. They stopped worshipping gods and they truncated their pantheon of gods to the point where they're ending up worshipping terrifying demons. And this is what's happening today. They're worshipping terrifying demons in the terms of statistical modelling. Now, this shows a degradation. And a lot of the same things that happened at the end of the Roman Empire, the sexual degeneracy, the paedophilia and so on, we're seeing in mass today. We have a children's minister here in Ireland who really only has one agenda, the sexualisation of children. Nothing else. That's it. And he's obsessed with it. Good friend of Peter Tatchell. And I'm not saying he's anything like that, but that's what he seems to be. This first order of business was to lower the age of transgender transitioning for children. First order of business. Not feeding children, not ensuring education. That was his first order of business. The cultural Marxist thing. Now, we saw that video from last year of the meeting of the Communist League of America, whatever it was called, the Communist Party of America. I think it was in Atlanta. And the audience, they had to take the videos down. Not only was it ridiculous, just the stuff itself was ridiculous. It was comical. But the audience was full of perverts, and you could tell them they were all nonsense. They were after the kids. And this is what the paedophiles do. They jump on anything that they think can get them access to kids. That's why they support the Greens. That's why they supported the Communist Party of America in America. They think that if they can disrupt the system and destroy it, they'll be able to have sex with children and get away with it. And we're seeing that today big time. And that's all. This is all end of the empire stuff. Not the beginning of the new technocratic revolution, but the end of the empire. And the empire that's collapsing is what the Americans call the Judeo-Christian Western world. It's collapsing. Now, people may lament that, but, you know, the history of Western civilization is in Mozart after Mozart. You know, it has its ups and downs. And like everything else, it's doomed to fail. But the thing is, I don't think there's anything there out there replacing it yet. I think the likes of Gates and his technological worldview, or that dickhead Elon Musk and the rest of them, I don't think they're as the hot shits that they try to make out they are. I still think that the real game is yet to unfold, and it's everything to play for. And this is where the parallel society comes in. Now, you know, I've been promoting this idea of a parallel society. This is not becoming a breakaway survivalist in the woods. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to do it, it's good, you're not your own business, good, don't you? But that's not practical for most of us. This has been in the game and not part of it. So you do what you have to do in society to keep yourself out of trouble, but you develop ways and modality of thinking and social circles, the tribe like we have here, as a means to sidestep it, and not to sidestep it so to bring it down, because that's a Christian mentality. This idea of salvation and like all that stuff. It's the purpose of that is to make our lives, the ones who step to one side, easier. Now, for instance, like if I could apply it to a game, here's where I could apply it. Monopoly, right? Now, Monopoly, we've all played Monopoly, and you have your little greenhouses and your little red hotels, community chess and your chance cards and all this, and there's a board, and the whole thing is about accumulation of real estate in order to collect rents and so on like that, right? Now, suppose we are in a Monopoly game, us, the ones who want to go parallel society, right? Here's examples of how you could do it, right? Suppose, in the real life stuff now I'm saying, right? Someone gets the capital and ends up buying a load of the red hotels. Okay? Well, those red hotels are only as useful to them as an economic source as if people use them. So you go camping instead. You get a camper van instead. You stay in other people's houses in the tribe. You sidestep the hotel thing. You're not giving money to the hoteliers and the big hotel chains. You're keeping it in your pocket, and you've sidestepped it. A good one here in Ireland is that they're putting a big tax on solid fuel. Many people in the countryside depend on solid fuel. And in Ireland, it's a thing called peat or turf. And this is they come in briquettes mostly. And the Greens in government here put a large tax on all that stuff. I went out and I bought a chainsaw. And I've got loads of trees on my land that I planted about 20 years ago. I don't have to buy them. So I don't have to pay that tax. I cut down the trees and have forward. And I will still need briquettes now and again for some things, but not like I used to. So therefore, I bypass that. That's my parallel society to the briquettes and the taxation of the Greens is a chainsaw. And the satisfaction of cutting down some trees that you planted yourself. And there you go, parallel society. I didn't run away into the woods. I still go and have to do my job. I still have to do all the other things that I needed of me in society. But I got out of it that one little way. Now, if we all do that without breaking the laws, this is one of the biggest problems to have those free men of the land bullshitters, is because everything was so very aggressive. Oh, I'm going to take on the law. I'm going to free man. I'm going to like, no. The way to do that is that's not how to do it. It's simply slip out every little way you can. Turn your garden into a vegetable garden if you want a garden for vegetables. Your front lawn. Fuck the neighbours. There's no laws against you doing that in Ireland. And if the neighbours are pissed off at you growing all vegetables in your front lawn, none of their business. Lots of things like that. There's loads of things. If you're in love and you're about to get married, why waste all that money on a wedding reception? Save it up. Use the money for something else. Don't spend it. Just see, parallel society is about breaking the habits that have been culturally and socially forced upon us, and those kinds of things. If you're getting married, why do you need to spend money on an engagement ring? Love is love. You don't need to have an engagement ring or a big wedding to sanctify that. Love is love. That's parallel society, and that's what if loads of us did that, we put all that bullshit out of business. All that bullshit would be put out of business. There's loads of things you can do. Lots of things. Instead of, buying books on second hand, instead of going to Amazon, supporting your little stores in your neighbourhood. It's really about very simple things. But if enough people do it, it can create a self-sustaining parallel society for them people alone. You see, this is not about changing the world. I'm not saying that people should do this so we'll have a new world and, all these bastards in Amazon, the rest of them will all be taken down. No, they won't be taken down. They'll still exist and they'll still making billions. Thing is that we won't be part of it, so there'll be a nice feeling of satisfaction. A nice feeling of, in charge of your life to a greater degree than you normally would be. That kind of thing. Like, I saw something the other day that it's cheaper now to rent a hotel, to stay in a hotel in central Dublin than it is to rent an apartment there. Now, if that was me, and I was in that position of making that kind of money now, I would say, well, fuck that, I'm not staying in a hotel. I'm not renting an apartment, having to deal with asshole landlords and stuff like that. I'll stay in a hotel for a few years maybe, and, move from hotel to hotel. And have, maybe my breakfast cooked for me every morning, my laundry done, my room all cleaned up, and I'd be very happy. And I can get everything else I've done. And I'll have my own little place, safe little home in the world, in a very nice place that someone else cleans. Rather than paying a landlord and have this furnish the place yourself, deal with some asshole landlord, and then, all the other shit involved with that. You go to a hotel, you pay one price, and that's the end of it. You can't live in a hotel. Why not? Because no one does that. Well, fuck that. I live in a parallel society. I'll do whatever I want. Or even like people who may even want to say, well, fuck that altogether. I'll get myself a mobile home and I'll live out of that. I'll get myself a camper van. I can live in a camper van on my own. No problem. And I get to go to my job. I'll drive to my job in the camper van. And I don't have to pay rent. This kind of thing. I mean, I've always been amazed how people here's one of the things that always gets me in Ireland. People who have shops in a street, right? And a house and apartments upstairs, and they're derelict. And then they go and get a mortgage on a fucking house in the suburbs, when they could live up above their shop for free. Parallel society. There's loads of these. I'll give you another one. I had a pair of shoes there, right? I loved them. I've had them for about 5 years now. They've been all over the world with me. The soles wore down and broke on one of them. And the upper half of the shoes, the leather and everything was as good as the day I bought them. Went to an old-fashioned cobbler, a shoe repair place, and he put 2 beautiful new soles on them for me. I didn't go out and buy a brand new pair of shoes. Parallel society. It's so simple. It's so easy. And you would not believe the satisfaction it gives you. It gives you, that's all it's about. People say, oh, well, that's nothing new in that. Of course there's nothing new about it, but now there's actually a term on it. But it's more than just, say, living frugally or intelligently or anything like that. It's a sense of satisfaction that gives you. It's a satisfaction that gives you. And it's like mortgages. Many people get houses and they think, oh, well, I'm free from the rental trap now. You're just going to spend 3 times as much over the lifetime of that house as what that house costs. The bank is going to get 2/3 of the money you'll put on that. That's why I say right now, if you can pay off your mortgage, do it. And, people never think of these things. Oh, I can't live in a camper van. Why not? Well, that's not something you do. Okay, go ahead. Rent your €3,000 a month studio in some shitty part of Dublin, because that's what people all do. You see, this is how magic works. Magic is a shifting of consciousness towards another modality of thinking. And as a result, reality changes at the same point too as well. It's like I was giving you the whole thing about words. You know, instead of saying, I'd like this, or I might do that, I wouldn't mind that, I fancy this, talk about it in terms of you have those things. And you'll be amazed you will get them. You will get them. I'm telling you, you will get them. So, you know, I have this, I got that, I achieved this, I made that. And you will get them. You know, don't send... I know this is not a new age bunk out here. This is literally rewiring your brain to give you confidence to tackle things and get the things that you want. And, you know, it's that simple. It's just a way of shifting your thinking. Yes, you deal with the same people. Yes, you have a job. Yes, you pay your mortgage. But like I said, the Monopoly board is a great example of that. That suddenly you're not a tenant in the hotel or an occupant of, a guest in the hotel or a tenant in the greenhouses. You have a camper van and you're neither one of those things. And suddenly you're another chance card for the aristocrats or the oligarchs or the money people. Rather than being a slave to them going around that board, you're off that board and you're now a danger to the ones in charge. And there's nothing they can do about it because you haven't broken any law. And you haven't done anything to hurt anybody. All you've done is slipped into a parallel counter aspect of your existence. And that's all it takes. And you can do that on the smallest little things to begin with. You'd be saying, I can't do any of this. Of course you can. You can find the smallest little thing. Like another one too. I remember talking to a fella in Dublin once, and he used to drive from Rathfarnham to Portobello down by the canal. I mean, you could walk that in an hour. You could walk that in an hour, no problem. You could cycle it in a half an hour. He used to drive in his car there every morning, and it took him 2 hours in the car. When he could have got a bus and the bus would have used the bus lanes and would have got him there in 25 minutes. But no, he had to go in his car. Why? Because that's what you do. So he had his car payments and he sits there in traffic. His health is affected. He's being driven mad. He's listening to talk radio bollocks all day. When all you have to do is hop on a bus with his Leap card, which is the Oyster card of Dublin, and even get a tax break on that from the government if you want. And he's free of the car. But no, you had to have the car because it's the thing you do. Well, the parallel society is the thing you don't do. Take care. Love yous all. Bye.